Hello everyone, this is Dulu, your British Bangladeshi here again. I'm going to do another reaction video to the entire history of China. Now this video is about 3 hours long. I'm not going to do the reaction in one go, obviously that's too long. So what I'll do is I'll do it in about 10-minute segment each, and then you can watch it at your leisure. But I think China is a rising power. I believe it is a great civilization in both historically and will be the preeminent power within the next 50 to 100 years. And this is why I'm sort of investing time in understanding and learning more about China, Chinese history and culture, etc. If there are any suggestions you have for the videos I should watch on China or anything else for that matter, China, India, Europe, America, etc., or any other topic, do please let me know and I'll try and do my best to do a reaction video on it. But yeah, so we'll start this one. It's an entire history of China. It takes about 2 hours and 50 minutes, but I'll do it in 10-minute sections. Then once we get to about the 10 minutes, I'll end and then do the other 10 minutes some other day. So we'll just get started. I'm just going to pause it for a second and just open the video up. Yeah, so here we are, just in getting full page, and then we'll get started.
The land of China was once shrouded in mystery to the rest of the ancient world. The Silk Road was a connection between the two realms that suggested China to be of immense wealth and power. Whilst these distant civilizations would see dramatic falls, China would continue to rise through countless dynasties and emperors for thousands of years, forming the global superpower we know today.
Hold on guys, I think I forgot to turn my camera on, so I'll just go back and start again. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you're old and you don't know how technology works. But I'll just start it again. So I'm just going to pause it now. I'll start it again. Yep, there we go.
The land of China was once shrouded in mystery to the rest of the ancient world. The Silk Road was a connection between the two realms that suggested China to be of immense wealth and power. Whilst these distant civilizations would see dramatic falls, China would continue to rise through countless dynasties and emperors for thousands of years, forming the global superpower we know today. From constructing the longest structure in the world to hosting the largest and deadliest wars in mankind's history, China is the longest continuous civilization on Earth, dating back 5,000 years, withstanding the ancient era, the Middle Ages, and now the modern period. But can they continue on? To understand this fascinating land, we must start from the beginning.
Hold on guys, I think there's someone.
The majority of China's earliest settlements began along the beach.
Back again. There we go. I'll start from where we left off. There we go.
Basin of the Yellow River in the north and the Yangtze in the south. The people resided on floodplains and lived agricultural lifestyles, growing a plethora of millet and rice. The conditions were fair for farming, but a major issue plagued the newly blossoming communities. Flooding from the Yellow River constantly displaced or killed settlers, washing away their crops and lodgings in the process. The land was cruel and inhospitable, threatening their newfound way of life. That was until the legendary and likely mythological Yu the Engineer was tasked with controlling the flow of the rivers. Yu knew firsthand that
I'm not quite sure why he thinks Yu the Engineer was mythical, given how advanced Chinese civilization has been for most of human history. Actually, I'm not sure why he would be mythical. I'm sure there were lots of genius engineers in China in all periods of Chinese history, even in its doldrums in the last 200 years. So I'm not sure why he's saying that's a myth. That's a bit of a strange one, but who knows.
the waterways had not been the settlers' biggest adversary for no reason. His father, Gwyn, had already spearheaded past efforts to control the rivers, and a decade of his life had been spent on building a series of dikes and dams which ultimately proved ineffective. No matter how large Gwyn and his men built their walls, the river would prevail time and time again. Unfazed by his father's failures, Yu was more than determined to carry out the monumental task. He recruited the help of one Hao Yi, another semi-mythical agricultural genius, who is credited with supposedly introducing millet to humanity.
Semi-mythical, I don't know what that means. We seem to, ancient European, we seem to always assume they existed, an European genius. I'm not sure why an Asian genius, and in particular Chinese genius, is semi-mythical or is not supposed to have existed. If they didn't, who did the work then? So I'm not sure where all this is coming from. I could be wrong, who knows?
The pair discussed schematics together and eventually built a canal-based irrigation system, which removed most of the excess floodwater into the sea, while saving some to be reutilized for the growing of crops. Just like that, the system's debut had finally ended the era of flooding, and Yu the engineer was named China's ruler on account of his great success. Thus began the Shah dynasty, the catalyst for China's dynastic system. The dynasty and its lands were very prosperous under Yu. They remained a mainly agricultural society, but are credited with creating many great Chinese inventions, such as stone tools used for farming and the lunar calendar. Eventually, Yu divided the territory into 9 provinces, and while each one was governed by their own lord, they were required to stay loyal to Yu's reign. Long after his years of stopping rivers and winning battles against neighboring tribes, old age and death closed in on Yu, which brought forth the question, what now? Yu decided that he did not want to pass the torch of leadership onto his son Qi. He instead wished for his Minister of Justice, Gao Yao, to take over. Unfortunately, Gao Yao died soon thereafter, and so a tribal leader named Yi was chosen to take on the role. The provincial lords disagreed with this decision. They had grown so fond of Yu the Great throughout his 45 years as emperor that they insisted upon his son Qi being his successor. Their wish was eventually granted. Qi was the first ruler of China to be granted power, not for his merit or capability, but because of his bloodline and connections. This hereditary system would last for thousands of years. It was in the 16th century BCE that the Shah dynasty finally met its fate. The last ruler of Yu the Great's bloodline, Jie, was said to be a cruel, sadistic leader who led a handful of military operations solely for revenge and personal gain, and filled his free time with sex slaves, drunken orgies, and senseless violence. Perhaps he was too blinded by his hedonism to sense what was brewing in the lands he now ruled. There was a concept in ancient China known as the Mandate of Heaven, a seemingly Shakespearean principle that not only states that heaven gives noble men the ruling power of China, but that any wicked, unjust leaders will be removed. Heaven had clearly taken issue with Jie. China had entered the Bronze Age, and much to Jie's dismay, a new rebellious power emerged with brand new bronze weapons. The Shah were promptly overthrown by this group, which would become known as the Shang dynasty. Not only did they emerge victorious against the corrupt king.
Oh, by the way, many of these videos are done by American and in American English, so that's why they pronounce certain things in a certain way. Dynasty in English is dynasty, and American English is dynasty. So we pronounce it in English as dynasty. So just some few things there for those whose first language may not be English, if you're wondering why some words sound very different in American English. That's why, because different people pronounce things differently. And it's all fine, each to their own, as they say.
Jie and his men, but the Shang dynasty to this day have something that the Shah lack: a written history. Oracle bone inscriptions were an ancient form of Chinese writing, usually engraved on animal bones or turtle shells. There are over 3,000 documented characters from the era of the Shang dynasty, many of which are either still used or similar to modern Chinese characters. Considering the Shang dynasty was in power about 36.
When it comes, I don't want to interrupt too much, so I'll try not to interrupt too much. But writing is the key to civilization. All the greatest civilizations and some of the earliest in West Asia, places like Iraq, Persia, little bits of Syria, what used to be called Mesopotamia, etc., or the ancient Akkadians in West Asia, who were the first ones to invent writing in West Asia. I mean, I think the first ones were the Phoenicians in what is now sort of Lebanon, Palestine, Israel. But writing is a key sign of civilization. You know a society is advancing when they start writing things down and develop a writing system. So that is the heart of civilization. Without it, I'm not quite sure we would have progressed as we have done throughout, in fact, all of the planet. So yeah, that's a key event in any civilization's history, and is also for China as well.
600 years ago, we know an impressive amount about daily life and key traditions because of archaeological finds such as the Oracle Bones. The Shang dynasty was quite mobile and oftentimes traveled to various islands and shores on their conquests. Upon each return, they would bring back seashells which were used as currency within their society. They employed a feudal system that brought great wealth to nobility and subjugated peasants and farmers to difficult lives. The poor possessed little agency, but the military and government were far too powerful at the time for any peasant resistance to overthrow them. The Shang leaders were a highly religious people with high priests having heaps of influence over the lands. These priests paid much attention to the death and dying process, as well as subsequent burials, and established a handful of rituals to preserve their power and safety both on Earth and in heaven. Common practices in the dynasty included sacrificing humans for good weather and fortune, as well as burying slaves alive with their masters to ensure their servitude in the afterlife. The Shang dynasty possessed a mighty military and workforce, conquering region after region and building major walled cities across the land as they went. It was a restless time, with constant battles with various tribes, as well as internal struggles, forcing the Shang to move their capital city 5 times. But their skill in molding bronze weapons and chariot wheels allowed them to squash opposing forces and remain in power for around 600 years. In a life that eerily resembled that of Xia ruler Zhe, the last Shang emperor Di Xin was overcome by temptations and began living a life of pure debauchery. He hosted massive orgies and inflicted cruel sadistic torture onto those who opposed him. A handful of Di Xin's family.
This is how we made our work flow back.
Sorry, I had to pause it there because the advert intervened, so I'll just start it again. Just make sure I've got everything on correctly. Yep, so we'll just start again.
Di Xin's family members were jailed for trying to intervene in his life of partying, and it is said that he had his own uncle's heart ripped out of his chest as punishment. It was in 1046 BCE when the Zhou of the Wei Valley, vassals of the Shang, challenged the dynasty's reign at the Battle of Muya. The impoverished Chinese population was strongly in support of the Zhou, and many slaves being forced to fight for the diminishing Shang dynasty defected to fight for the Zhou. The members of the Shang army who remained loyal were eviscerated in a bloody battle that resulted in the deaths of around 50,000 Zhou soldiers and hundreds of thousands of the Shang army. After such a dismal effort, Di Xin fled to his palace, surrounded himself with his treasures, and set the building on fire, killing himself. With such a decisive victory, the Zhou believed they had inherited the mandate of heaven, which would now become a major principle of Chinese politics. The Zhou dynasty was China's longest-lasting dynasty, spanning 789 years from 1046 BCE to 256 BCE. The events of those nearly 8 centuries were some of the most important happenings not only in Chinese history, but in the development of the world as we know it. It was a period distinctly marked by both invention and change. Large-scale irrigation systems transformed agriculture. A new network of canals was built to transport various goods across previously unfathomably long distances. Horseback riding became the standard for both travel and military use. News of silk production spread to Europe, and the Chinese moved past bronze in favor of mastering iron. Perhaps the most significant of these newfound transitions was that of bronze to iron. Europe and the Middle East were hundreds of years behind the Zhou, who could now cast iron using heat-resistant clay in furnaces and molds. They used the liquefied metal to mass-produce weapons and farming tools, propelling both the military and general society forward at an unprecedented rate. With such a rapidly growing empire, however, instability is sure to rear its head. The Zhou dynasty can be split up into two distinct periods, the first of which is the Western Zhou. During this time, the newfound dynasty was operating under the feudal system, a pyramid-shaped power structure where the power and land are concentrated in the royal family and are distributed to local lords as is seen fit. While this was functional for the Zhou for about 2 centuries, their control and stability began to diminish as the feudal lords grew increasingly powerful and self-serving. They began to revolt and raided the capital of Haoxing, and in a move that echoed their previous rulers' constant capital movements, the Zhou fled to their new capital city, Luoyang. In everything but name and technicality, the vassal states had essentially taken control of the land and its governance. This transition marked the beginning of the Eastern Zhou period, now recognized as having begun in 771 BCE. This era yielded perhaps the most significant Chinese philosophies of all time in 3 schools of thought: Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism. Confucius, or Master Kong, was the most renowned ancient Chinese philosopher, and his school of thought aimed to create a society driven by respect, justice, and a widespread desire for peace. He was born as Kong Chu in the Zhou state of Lu. His father, Kong He, was a commandant of the Lu's garrison, but died when Confucius was only 3 years old, leaving his mother to raise the boy alone in poverty. He committed his life to education and studied classic Chinese works at a school for commoners. Now educated in literature, history, and music, he was married at 19 and raised a family. Confucius's mother passed away just a short 4 years later around the age of 40. Confucius is said to have mourned her death for 3 years. He worked in a variety of low-ranking government jobs, such as bookkeeping and tending to livestock, just to afford a dignified burial for his mother. As he grew older, Confucius had built a considerable reputation amongst the local ruling class. The state of Lu was ruled by 3 ducal families, who
I must admit, I hadn't realized that Master Kong or Confucius had such humble beginnings. I always assumed for some reason that he was part of the nobility. So that's a good reminder to me. And it sort of encapsulates modern China, the rise of China over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and obviously is continuing, of what hard work and genius, natural genius can do. So it's sort of the life of Confucius, from what I've just heard briefly, seems to foreshadow the rise of China again, having been in the doldrums, if you like, for the last 200 years, and it's coming back on the world again. So it's for me, it parallels the life of Master Kong, that he came from such humble beginnings and to become such a genius of world renown. So just my thoughts, really.
Appointed Confucius as the Minister of Criminal Matters. Confucius believed that there was a natural goodness to humanity, and so the core of his philosophy was to restore an ethically decrepit China's moral code through social relationships. After hearing of the wars, orgies, live burials, and disembowelment practiced by past rulers, one can understand why he had grown increasingly discontent with the decay of Chinese society. He created a hierarchy of being to restore order, and insisted upon each citizen understanding and adopting their respective role in this latter. This system is known as the 5 bonds, and describes the following relationships needed to achieve social harmony.
I know I said I'd do it in 10-minute videos, but it's so interesting I'm going to do a few more minutes and stop when I have to sort of carry on and do other things. So just carry on for a few more minutes, because it's really, really interesting.
Ruler to subject, husband to wife, father to son, elder brother to younger brother, and friend to friend. Confucius harmony. Ruler to Chinese society. He created a hierarchy of being to restore order, and insisted upon each citizen understanding and adopting their respective role in this latter. This system is known as the Five Bonds and describes the following relationships needed to achieve social harmony: ruler to subject, husband to wife, father to son, elder brother to younger brother, and friend to friend. Confucius stressed the importance of respecting one's elders and accepting their subjugation as a necessary step to maintaining a civil society. Family is at the basis of the Five Bonds, and its effects are still seen in modern-day China. The tradition of filial piety means that parents are indebted to their children in terms of offering care, safety, and education, and children are indebted to their parents in terms of offering services, respect, and maintaining the family's honor through their actions. A family is to uphold their morals as a unit, and the benevolent family unit will subsequently expand to a greater Chinese society, as China to Confucius was, in essence, one massive family. His system called for the government to serve and take care of its people as parents would their children. While Confucius called for social harmony through widespread benevolence, another school of thought was developing in China that directly opposed his teachings: legalism. Unlike Confucianism, legalism states that people are inherently bad and require law and punishment to be kept in order. It was developed from the teachings of Han Feizi, a Confucian reformer who believed that an ordered society is a strict society, and a good citizen is one who allows themselves to be controlled.
I must admit, I don't think, I've read a history of China many years ago, but I can't remember this name of this particular individual. So it's really good to sort of learn about this actually. So yeah, it's really interesting. Just carry on.
Gained traction rivaling Confucianism throughout the Zhou dynasty. The third major philosophy of the Zhou was Taoism, which stressed the need for humanity to reach a natural harmony with the universe. Humans are supposed to follow the universe's will and should avoid the tendency to go against its energy. The classic yin and yang symbol encapsulates the philosophy, as one must accept the natural balance and forces of the universe to achieve harmony. Unlike Confucianism and legalism, which called for different moral actions and behaviors from the Chinese population, Taoism embraced inaction, and a philosophy that can aptly be summarized as going with the flow. These three philosophies are all incredibly prevalent throughout Chinese.
Get 50 seriously?
Sorry guys, had to pause it there again for the adverts, so we'll just carry on. Just going to make sure everything's set up. Yep. Okay, we'll just carry on for a few more minutes.
And the contemporary state, and are the most important contribution of the Zhou dynasty's reign. Because of the prominence of philosophical development in this time, the era and its products are recognized as the 100 Years of Thought. At the same time as these developments, various states within the Zhou dynasty were beginning to declare their independence. Former dukes calling themselves kings, and insisted they were politically on par with the Zhou king. This period is known as the Warring States, a time of unrest in which 7 former vassal states fought for the ultimate reign of China's lands. They were the Qin, Han, Yan, Wei, Chu, and Qi. It was at this time that famed general and strategist Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, the earliest documented work on military science and war. Though the book covered a wide range of military tactics and wartime philosophies, such as when to push your armies forward and how to develop strategic flexibility in the face of a wildly unpredictable war, it is no wonder why the art of war was birthed in this era. War had transformed in China. Battles became more sophisticated in the Warring States period, with generals using strategy and deceit to gain the upper hand. With increased troop numbers and conscriptions for males as young as 15, individual battles also often dragged on for much longer than a handful of days like the clashes of before, with some stretching as long as months or years. The most powerful rising force of the country during this time was the Qin. They were led by Ying Zheng, or Qin Shi Huang, which literally translates to First Emperor of Qin. They resided in a dangerous region of China where a powerful military was in need for survival, and thus adopted the use of various weapons technologies such as iron swords and crossbows. The first of the 7 kingdoms to collapse at the hands of the Qin was Han. They were the weakest of the bunch, and their territory rested right in the center of ancient China, leaving them vulnerable to attacks from all sides. Though the alliances and mutual interests of before protected them in the past, the Warring States period brought forth an every-man-for-himself attitude. Yin Zheng and his men swiftly conquered the territory and forced King An of Han's surrender within the year, though there were far more worthy opponents in the near future. Yin Zheng's next target was the state of Zhao. It was not the first time the two sides had battled. Just a couple decades ago, they had fought in the Battle of Kangping, which stands as one of the deadliest battles in human history. Records estimate 450,000 Zhao deaths and 250,000 deaths on the Qin side. Because of this decisive Qin victory, the Zhao state was still weakened when Yin Zheng marched his men past their borders to finish what had been started long ago. Despite their decaying state, the Zhao possessed something that the Qin did not: a general by the name of Li Mu. Li Mu had an impressive military reputation for his previous deceits of massive enemy armies and victories in numerous raids and battles. When it became clear that the Qin had their sights set on conquering the state of Zhao, his attention too shifted to the western borders to confront the newly ascended Yin Zheng. Any progress troops made were immediately trumped by Li Mu's tactics, and it became quite clear to Yin Zheng that so long as Li Mu was alive, little progress would be made. Failing on the battlefield, he targeted the general through tricky political means. He bribed figures of the Zhao courts and sent spies to create disorder within their governmental systems. His goal was to create distrust between Yumyu, a king of Zhao, and General Li Mu. He eventually succeeded, and the king became convinced that Li Mu and his trusted associates were planning a violent rebellion. The general was relieved of his position and executed. Zhao was swiftly conquered after Li Mu's death, as his replacement, Zhao Kong, was no match for the bloodthirsty Qin. The state's capital, Handan, was taken over in 228 BCE, and Yin Zheng saw to it that naive King Yumyu was too executed. Though there were some self-proclaimed kings and kingdoms of Zhao following this major loss, the state was no longer a true threat to the Qin. Any rebellion or descendant of a king that rose to power was squashed over the course of the next handful of years, until the region as a whole was completely annexed. After this success, Yin Zheng then directed his focus to the kingdom of Yan. Well aware of the impending military force at his doorstep, the Crown Prince Dan aimed to defeat the Qin in another way, by assassinating Yin Zheng himself. He picked an assassin named Jing Ke to kill Zheng in a suicide mission using a poison dagger of the sharpest possible quality. The plan was to approach the Qin court and pretend to be a traitorous nobleman begging for mercy. He was to offer maps of Dukong, the fertile farmland region that Zheng wanted to claim first in his conquest, as well as the head of defective Qin general Huan Yi's head, before sticking the blade deep into Yin Zheng. The dagger would be hidden along the side of the maps, so Jin Ke could strike as soon as he got close. Huan Yi, the owner of the aforementioned head required for this plan to work, had fallen out of the Qin's good graces and was seeking revenge for their dismissal, causing the Qin to put a bounty of 1,000 gold pieces on his head. After Jing Ke explained the plan, the disgraced general agreed to commit suicide by cutting his own throat for the sake of collecting his head, so long as it would mean that Yin Zheng would die and the Qin would collapse. He cut his own throat without protest. With both the head and the maps now ready, Jing Ke and his supremely nervous associate, Qin Wuyang, traveled to present their gifts to Yin Zheng. Qin Wuyang was so anxious when they reached the palace that he entered a near-paralyzed state and was almost unable to move. Jing Ke excused his skittish behavior as nothing more than awe and cultural shock, as Qin Wuyang was but a rural boy who had never truly seen the world. Despite Jing Ke's excuses, Qin Wuyang was not allowed to move up any further, and the assassin would now have to enter the court by his lonesome. Jing Ke calmly approached King Zheng with the map scroll and waited for it to be unrolled before grabbing the dagger and lunging towards him. King Jing was startled by the sudden movement and was able to slip out of his grasp, turning away and running away from the attacker. Mayhem ensued in the palace, with the king narrowly surviving by continuously running in circles behind a pillar. The armed guards were all but stationed outside, and his ceremonial sword was too long to be pulled out quickly enough to defend himself against Jing Ke. So all he could do was hope that someone would intervene before the assassin closed in. Luckily for Ying Zheng, a royal physician stepped forward and hurled his medicine bag at Jing Ke, slowing him down just long enough for the king to unsheath his blade. He stabbed Jing Ke in the leg, prompting the injured assassin to throw his dagger in a last gasp attempt to kill his target. He missed and was stabbed 8 more times by Ying Zheng. In his dying moments, the assassin taunted the king with obscene gestures until both he and the now fleeing Qin Wuyong were executed by the guards. The attempt had failed horribly and had only created an angrier, more obsessive Yin Zheng. He and his army invaded Yan in 226 BCE and quickly conquered the capital, Jicheng. In an effort to earn the King of Qin's forgiveness, a now desperate King Shi of Yan executed his own son, the Crown Prince Dan, as an apology for the assassination attempt. He sent the head of his boy to Ying Zheng, which postponed the complete annexation of Yan for a small handful of years before the Qin returned to destroy them once and for all in 222 BCE. Ying Zheng began his attacks on the states of Wei and Shu at the same time, fearing that one state may take advantage of the fact that the Qin were solely focused on the other and catch the Qin armies off guard. 2 of Ying Zheng's most trusted generals, a father-son duo by the names of Wang Zhen and Wang Ben, launched simultaneous attacks on the 2 states in 225 BCE. While Wang Zhen began the Qin conquest of the incredibly large and powerful Chu, his son Wang Ben led an army of 600,000 men to conquer 10 cities along the northern border of Wei, thereby guarding their flank. Wei crumbled fairly easily after Wang Ben cleverly redirected the waters of the Yellow River to flood the capital of Daliang. 100,000 people, many of which were civilians, were killed in the flooding. The king surrendered, allowing for all the Qin manpower to be focused on the powerful Chu. Their initial attacks on the Chu had not been particularly successful, with the Qin army being pushed back and repelled. Wang Zhen was brought out of retirement 2 years after the initial sieges with an army 3 times larger than before, and the capital city was taken. The king was captured and the state was annexed, leaving only one state to be captured, Qi. In 221 BCE, Ying Zheng's men faced very little pushback and conquered the kingdom within the same year. When the Qin arrived at the capital city, the king of Qi simply surrendered the land without a fight. The warring states had all been conquered, and thus began the Qin dynasty, ruled under the iron fist of Ying Zheng.
I think that's a good time to stop for now. So we'll continue this some other time when I get a chance to do another reaction video. We'll continue it from here, but that was really interesting, a bit more detailed history about the early ancient China. And I think we're now getting into the period where China gets its name from, the Qin dynasty. Because I remember reading many years ago about Shi Huangdi, I think that's how it's pronounced. Apologies if I mispronounced it. I think he is seen as the founder of the Chinese state and the Chinese people as such, as we know them now, or roughly as we know them now. So we'll continue some other time on this. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do subscribe and like as well. Just press the subscribe button if you're logged into a YouTube account. It doesn't cost anything. If you want to make a contribution, there's a link below as well for via coffee. You can pay for a coffee, whatever the amount is. And do share the video as well. And thank you so much, and we'll continue this next time. Bye for now, all from your British Bangladeshi. Bye.